The queen's mandibles dripped, not with venom but something far more bitter. Disdain. Defective. One word and the incubator hissed open, ejecting the unwanted offspring into the cold recyclery chute. The chute plunged into the depths of the hive, spitting its cargo into the cavernous recyclery. A symphony of grinding metal and pressurized steam echoed through the dimly lit space, punctuated by the mournful shriek of sorting machinery. Flickering emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows across the mountains of discarded exoskeletons, and failed genetic experiments, the detritus of the Prilorian pursuit of perfection. Here, beneath the pulsating heart of the hive, genetic failures were processed into raw materials, their potential dissolved back into the collective. Rhea, designated defective, was more than just scrap. Her genetic code contained two critical errors. First, a mutation prevented her development into the warrior caste, the backbone of Prilorian society. Second, and perhaps more damning, she possessed empathic abilities, a trait considered an aberration, a weakness to be purged. In a remote observation post overlooking the recyclery, James Wright watched the endless flow of rejects. His face, etched with years of xenobiological study and galactic disillusionment, reflected the dim light of his monitors. He was a ghost in his own life, drifting through the motions of a job that had long since lost its meaning. His current task, cataloging the genetic defects found within the recyclery's output. He typed methodically, noting the variations in chitin density and neural pathway anomalies, each entry a tiny epitaph for a life that never was. The futility of it all pressed down on him, another layer of dust settling on his already weary soul. Suddenly, a klaxon blared, shattering the monotonous hum of the recyclery. Red lights pulsed, bathing the observation post in an urgent glow. A synthesized voice announced, "Containment breach. Sector 7. Prilorian reject chute. Immediate investigation required." James sighed, a puff of stale air escaping his lips. Sector 7. Of course. With weary resignation, he deactivated the cataloging program and rose from his console. Another mess to clean up, another reason to question his life choices. He grabbed his standard issue sidearm and headed towards the transport elevator, the alarm a relentless drumbeat against his temples. He found her huddled within a deactivated processing unit in Sector 7, amidst tangled wires and sparking conduits. The unit, designed to crush and render organic waste, had malfunctioned, leaving a small pocket of space where she had managed to survive. Rhea, severely injured, her delicate exoskeleton cracked and bleeding hemolymph, but alive. Even in the dim light, James noticed something unusual. Unlike the dull, chitinous armor of typical Prilorians, Rhea's exoskeleton possessed a faint, ethereal bioluminescence. A soft, internal glow pulsed beneath her carapace, casting a faint, otherworldly light. He hesitated, his hand hovering over his weapon. Regulations were clear. Contain the breach, eliminate the threat, report the incident. But something in Rhea's vulnerability, in the gentle glow emanating from her broken form, stayed his hand. Against all logic, against all protocol, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years: empathy. He reached out, not with a weapon but with a tentative hand. A burst of static crackled across the Prilorian hive's communication network. A brief, fragmented message, barely audible amidst the constant drone of the collective consciousness. Something was stirring within the hive, an unusual activity rippling through the normally rigid structure. James knew the Prilorian queen's obsession with genetic purity. Any deviation, any perceived weakness was ruthlessly culled. Rhea, with her defective genes and her fragile form, was an anomaly, a threat to the very foundation of their society. Ignoring the blaring alarm and the potential consequences, James retrieved a medkit from his transport and began administering basic aid. He salvaged what he could from the deactivated processing unit's sterile bandages, nutrient solutions improvising with his limited knowledge of Prylorian biology. Rhea, despite her injuries, exhibited a surprising level of intelligence and awareness. She watched him with large, multifaceted eyes, her antennae twitching. She communicated through a series of soft clicks and gestures, a rudimentary language that transcended the barriers of species. As he worked, James noticed scorch marks around the deactivated processing unit. The containment breach wasn't an accident. Rhea, despite her injuries and her perceived weakness, had somehow managed to disable the unit and escape, a feat that suggested abilities far beyond what her defective classification would imply. The monitors flatlined, a piercing whine cutting through the sterile air. James cursed, his heart hammering against his ribs. He slapped the console, overriding the automatic shutdown, and frantically checked Rhea's vitals. The alien's carapace was cold, clammy beneath his fingertips. He had no idea what constituted a normal Prylorian heart rate, let alone how to treat whatever was happening. Damn it. He grabbed a syringe filled with a broad-spectrum stimulant, a standard remedy for most humanoid species, and plunged it into Rhea's carapace. Nothing. He needed something else, something specific. His gaze fell on a dusty crate labeled nutrient-paste human infant formula. Desperate, he grabbed a tube and squeezed a dollop of the pale, tasteless gel onto his finger. He gently pried open Rhea's mandibles and offered the paste. The alien recoiled, a low hiss escaping her vocal sacs. Her luminescent blood, usually a vibrant emerald, had dulled to a sickly olive green. That was it, wasn't it? The key to her survival was in that strange, glowing blood. Okay, James muttered, wiping the rejected paste from Rhea's face. No baby food, got it. He ransacked the station's meager storage, a forgotten corner of the galaxy used for experiments long since abandoned. Finally, behind a stack of corroded nutrient vats, he found it. A sealed container of insect protein, a relic from a xenobiological study on arachnid digestion. He prepared a small portion, the protein smelling vaguely of ammonia and burnt sugar. Rhea watched him with wary eyes, her antennae twitching. He offered it cautiously, and this time she tentatively accepted. She consumed it slowly, her mandibles working with a delicate precision that belied her fragile state. A faint green glow returned to her blood. As days passed, James noticed something peculiar. Rhea's bioluminescence intensified whenever she was near certain pieces of equipment, specifically the energy conduits that powered the station's life support systems. One afternoon, as he was recalibrating the atmospheric regulator, Rhea crawled closer, her carapace practically buzzing with light. She reached out a spindly arm, her multi-jointed fingers gesturing towards the regulator's control panel. Then she emitted a series of rapid clicks and whistles, a complex language he couldn't understand. It was clear she was trying to communicate, trying to show him something. "What is it, Rhea?" he asked, his voice soft. "What are you trying to tell me?" He racked his brain trying to decipher her gestures. The regulator, the ventilation system, the escape route. Could she be trying to tell him how she got here, how she escaped the recyclery? He followed her gaze to a maintenance panel near the floor. He pried it open, revealing a narrow access tunnel to the station's ventilation system. Hidden behind a tangle of wires, he found it, a small, discarded Prylorian data chip. "Bingo," he whispered. He tried to interface the chip with the station's computer, but the system rejected it. It required a Prylorian interface, something he didn't have. Frustration gnawed at him. He banged his head on the console, the chip skittering across the metal surface. Rhea, sensing his frustration, reached out and touched the chip with her antennae. A jolt of energy crackled through the air, and the chip flickered to life. A distorted image flashed on the screen. The Prylorian queen, her mandibles clicking with cold fury. The image dissolved into a sequence of complex genetic code, a string of alien symbols that meant nothing to him. Then, understanding dawned. "Damn it," he breathed. She's broadcasting a kill order. He scrambled to access the station's communication logs, filtering for Prilorian signals. He found it, a localized communication, a series of encrypted messages directed at search drones. The drones were tasked with locating and eliminating any Prilorian offspring bearing the deviant genetic marker displayed on the data chip. They weren't coming to retrieve her. They were coming to destroy her. A wave of protectiveness washed over him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. He couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't let that happen. He accessed the station's external sensor array and disabled it, masking Rhea's presence from the approaching drones. The act was simple, but it spoke volumes. James Wright, the jaded xenobiologist, had made a choice. "All right, kid," he said, turning to Rhea, his voice firm. "Looks like we've got company. Time to lock this place down." He began reinforcing the observation post's defenses, welding blast shields over the windows and rerouting power to the station's antiquated energy weapons. The transformation was complete. He wasn't just observing anymore, he was fighting. The heavy door groaned as James wrestled it shut, the magnetic seal hissing as it engaged. Another section of the station, dark and silent, sacrificed to the power drain. He moved quickly, his boots echoing on the metal deck towards the next junction. Conserve power, conserve air, create smaller, more defensible zones. It was a losing strategy, he knew, but it bought them time. He began rerouting power conduits, splicing wires with practiced ease. A klaxon blared suddenly, startling him. Red lights strobed across the corridor, one of his makeshift alarms. He cursed under his breath, too sensitive. He adjusted the sensor array, muttering, "Let's hope the real thing triggers it." He hurried back to Rhea. The soft, pulsing bioluminescence that usually emanated from her exoskeleton was noticeably dimmer, almost sickly. Her movements were sluggish, her antennae drooping. A knot of fear tightened in his stomach. He was losing her. He accessed the Prilorian data chip again, the holographic display flickering to life, still mostly indecipherable. Lines of alien script swam before his eyes, offering no clues. "Damn it," he hissed, pounding his fist on the console. "There has to be something." Rhea stirred weakly. She raised a frail appendage, gesturing towards a specific type of crystal formation visible through the reinforced window of the Geological Survey lab. They were large, geode-like structures, shimmering with internal light. James frowned. He remembered those crystals. He'd cataloged them years ago during a planetary survey. They contained rare trace elements used in advanced alien alloys. Could there be a link? "Trace elements," he murmured, "Prilorian biology. Maybe." He carefully chipped off a small piece of one of the crystals, its surface cool and smooth to the touch. Using a mortar and pestle, he ground it into a fine, iridescent powder. It shimmered like captured starlight. He mixed a pinch of the powder with the insect protein paste he'd synthesized, holding his breath as he offered it to Rhea. She regarded the mixture with hesitant curiosity. Slowly, tentatively, she consumed it. James watched, his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a faint flicker. Rhea's bioluminescence pulsed just a little brighter. A wave of relief washed over him. It was working. Suddenly, a new alarm shrieked, far more urgent than the first. The station's primary life support system. He raced to the control panel, his fingers flying across the keys. The temperature was dropping rapidly. Air pressure was plummeting. "Corrosion," he muttered, examining the diagnostics. "Coolant line rupture." He traced the leak to a section of the system that had been offline for years. The sealant required was a rare polymer, almost impossible to find. Then, a memory surfaced. Years ago, during a containment breach scare, he'd seen a stockpile of the sealant in a restricted access area, once used for containing dangerous alien pathogens. The area was quarantined, potentially contaminated. He glanced back at Rhea, her light fading again. He weighed the risk. Contamination versus starvation. A stable environment versus a slow, agonizing decline. As he began suiting up, preparing to enter the restricted zone, a faint flicker caught his eye. One of the external sensors. He reran the scan, filtering out the background radiation. A faint energy signature rapidly approaching the station. Too fast for debris. Too organized for a natural phenomenon. His blood ran cold. The Prylorian drones. He cross-referenced the signature with known Prylorian technology. Nothing. They were utilizing some kind of cloaking device, rendering them virtually undetectable by conventional sensors. He was blind. Rhea sensed his fear, his urgency. She reached out to him, her frail appendage brushing against his hand. He felt a surge of emotion, a wave of empathy washing over him. He saw his own dedication reflected in her multifaceted eyes. She knew the danger. She trusted him. He stood frozen, the sealant canister in his hand, the image of the approaching drones burned into his mind. Save Rhea or defend the station. He had to choose. Now, the sealant was the only chance, wasn't it? Even a slim one was better than watching Rhea. He pushed the thought away. The restricted zone. A graveyard of forgotten projects, of ethical compromises swept under the rug. But if it held the sealant? He tugged the collar of the jury-rigged biohazard suit tighter against his neck. Recycled polymers and scavenged filters, it was more hope than protection. The airlock hissed open, releasing him into a corridor thick with the ghosts of scientific hubris. The air hung heavy with the metallic tang of decay and the faint, sickly sweet odor of something alive but wrong. Failed experiments lined the walls. Containment units shattered, revealing glimpses of grotesque forms suspended in viscous fluids. Flickering emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows, turning every corner into a potential threat. He pressed on, his boots crunching on shattered glass and dried. Biological matter, there. The sealant canister gleaming faintly under a security laser grid. A web of emerald beams crisscrossed the alcove, protecting a cylinder labeled in faded galactic standard. Cryo-sealant, Prylorian compatible. Of course, meant to keep them contained, not healed. He examined the control panel, a relic of outdated technology. Rerouting the power supply was the only option, a risky one. He bypassed the primary circuits, splicing in a makeshift connection. The laser grid flickered, died, and a klaxon blared, its deafening shriek echoing through the abandoned corridors. And then, the scraping, metallic claws on metal. The dormant robotic defense system stirred from its slumber. Mutated maintenance drones, their bodies twisted and warped by years of exposure to experimental toxins, lurched from the shadows. Their optical sensors glowed with malevolent red light. He raised his plasma torch, the blue-white flame spitting and crackling. The first drone lunged, its metallic claws dripping with corrosive fluid. He sidestepped, the torch searing through its chassis, showering the corridor with sparks. More emerged, a relentless tide of twisted metal and corrupted code. He fought, a desperate dance of fire and shadow, each blast of the torch buying him precious seconds. Meanwhile, back in the lab, Rhea felt it. A tremor in the force, a tightening in her chest. The Prylorian drones. She could sense their cold, unwavering purpose, their intent to terminate, and they were close, too close. She tried to reach James to send a warning through the fragile tendrils of her telepathy, but the restricted zone. It was a dead spot, a cage for psychic energy. Her message dissolved into static. Panic clawed at her. She had to do something. The station's external defense cannons. If she could just activate them. Her small, weakened limbs strained against the heavy controls. The interface was designed for Prylorian strength, not her frail form. James slammed the last mutated drone against the wall, its circuits sputtering and dying. He ripped the sealant canister from its housing, the cold metal biting into his gloved hand. He had it. Now to get back to Rhea. He burst back into the main lab, panting, the klaxon still screaming in his ears. Rhea was slumped against the control panel, her face pale, her antennae twitching with effort. Rhea. He rushed to her side, ignoring the pain in his lungs. He quickly located the coolant line breach. With practiced efficiency, he applied the sealant, the hissing of escaping coolant gradually subsiding. The life support stabilized and a faint flush returned to Rhea's cheeks. A blinding flash erupted outside the main window. A Praelorian drone, decloaked, its weapon ports glowing with plasma energy, opened fire. The reinforced glass held, but only just. Then they saw them. Dozens of ships, a swarm of insectoid predators descending upon the station. The single drone was merely the first wave, a hunter flushing out its prey. James glanced at the power grid display. The incoming EMP bursts would overload the system in minutes. The station's limited defenses were woefully inadequate. He made a choice, a desperate gamble. He rerouted all remaining power to the defense grid, sacrificing life support, internal lighting, everything for one final defiant stand. The station shuddered as the energy surged. The external cannons whirred to life, targeting the approaching drones. For a moment, hope flickered. Then, the second wave hit. Targeted EMP bursts crippled the defense grid, plunging the station into darkness. The cannons fell silent. Life support systems failed. The artificial atmosphere began to bleed away into the void. James and Rhea were pinned down in the lab, the klaxon now a mocking death knell. The final Praelorian drone approached the lab window, its plasma cannon charging. A blinding blue light filled the room. The lab window imploded, a searing corona of plasma erupting inwards. James reacted instantly, a lifetime of instinct honed in hazardous environments kicking in. He shoved Rhea to the floor, his body a shield against the rain of superheated glass and twisted metal. A high-pitched whine filled the air, quickly overtaken by the shrieking alarm klaxons. His ears rang, vision blurred, but he registered Rhea's wide, terrified eyes. "Stay down," he yelled, his voice barely audible above the chaos. He scrambled for the emergency lockers, already feeling the telltale pressure change in his ears. The lab was rapidly depressurizing. He ripped open the locker and grabbed 2 emergency breathing masks. Securing one on Rhea was his priority. Her small face was dwarfed by the mask, but her breathing evened out, the frantic panic momentarily subdued. He slapped his own mask into place, the hiss of oxygen a welcome sound. "We need to move." He tried the main doors, but the emergency seals had slammed shut, thick metal plates sliding into place with a resounding thud. Sealed. No manual override. Damn it. He scanned the lab, his mind racing. They were trapped. Rhea tugged at his sleeve, her large eyes fixed on a section of the wall. She made a series of soft clicks and whistles, her small hand trembling as she pointed. He frowned, confused. "What is it?" She closed her eyes, her brow furrowed in concentration. A moment later, she opened them, her gaze intense. "Tunnel. Hidden. Behind." James stared at the wall. It was a smooth, featureless expanse of reinforced plasteel, but Rhea's empathic abilities. He trusted her instincts. "Where?" She pointed again, more precisely this time. "There. Maintenance." He grabbed his plasma torch from the workbench, the familiar weight reassuring in his hand. He ran to the indicated section of the wall and examined it closely. There, almost imperceptible, was a seam, a maintenance access panel. He activated the torch, the hissing blue beam cutting through the plasteel with alarming speed. Sparks flew, the acrid smell of burning metal filling the rapidly thinning air. The panel fell away, revealing a narrow, unlit tunnel. It was barely wide enough to crawl through. "This is it," he said, his voice muffled by the mane. "Get in." Rhea hesitated, fear evident in her eyes, but she understood the urgency. She scrambled into the tunnel, disappearing into the darkness. James followed, squeezing through the opening. The tunnel was cramped and claustrophobic. He could feel the cold metal against his suit, the rough edges digging into his skin. The air was getting thinner with every passing second, his lungs burning with each breath. They crawled blindly, inching their way forward. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever. Just when he thought he couldn't take it anymore, a faint light appeared ahead. He pushed forward, reaching a sealed emergency airlock. Hope surged through him, quickly followed by a wave of frustration. The airlock was sealed, its control panel dark and unresponsive. "Power's offline," he said, his voice strained. "We need an access code." He examined the panel, searching for a manual override. Nothing. He was running out of options and air. Then he had an idea, a desperate one. He reached for the power couplings on his biohazard suit. It was a risk diverting power from his life support, but it was their only chance. "Hold on," he said to Rhea, his fingers fumbling with the connections. He rerouted the suit's power to the airlock controls. The panel flickered to life, displaying a series of cryptic symbols. He needed the code. Rhea closed her eyes again, her breathing shallow and rapid. He could see the strain on her face. Then she began to tap on the panel, her small fingers moving with surprising speed and precision. She entered a sequence of symbols, a series he knew she couldn't have known. "How?" he started to ask. "Echoes," she gasped. "Engineer, before, psychic residue." The airlock hissed, the inner door sliding open. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed Rhea and pulled her inside, slamming the door shut behind them. The airlock sealed and the repressurization sequence began. The pressure returned slowly but surely, easing the burning in his lungs. The outer door opened, revealing a secondary research wing. It was mostly intact but dark and abandoned, the power grid offline. James activated the emergency lighting, bathing the wing in a dim, flickering glow. Rows of deactivated research pods lined the walls, their glass surfaces covered in dust. Dormant robots stood motionless in the corners, their metallic bodies cold and lifeless. Rhea shivered, her eyes darting around the room. "They are coming," she whispered. "Adapting, breaching." He knew she was right. The Prylorian drones wouldn't give up. He scanned the room, searching for anything that could help them. In the distance, he spotted a damaged communications array, its antennae bent and broken. It was a long shot, but it was their only chance to send a distress signal. "Stay here," he said, grabbing his tools. "I'm going to try to fix the comms." He started working, his fingers moving quickly and efficiently. He bypassed damaged circuits, rerouted power lines, and replaced broken components. He knew time was running out. Rhea tugged at his sleeve again, her eyes wide with alarm. "There," she said, pointing to a hidden alcove behind a row of research pods. "Weapons. Hidden cache." He followed her, his heart pounding. He reached the alcove and found it filled with old but functional plasma rifles and ammunition. He grabbed a rifle, its weight heavy in his hands. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The sound of tearing metal echoed through the research wing. The Prylorian drones had breached the outer door. They were inside. He turned to Rhea, ready to fight, but she wasn't there. He looked around frantically, finding her collapsed on the floor, gasping for air. Her small body convulsed, her eyes wide with pain. "Rhea," he cried, rushing to her side. "What's wrong?" She clutched at her chest, her voice barely a whisper. "Too much. Pressure, abilities, overload. Overload." James's fingers, slick with a mixture of his sweat and Rhea's viscous blood, tightened on her carapace. Her multifaceted eyes remained stubbornly closed. The alien scent of her skin, usually a faint, earthy musk, had soured, tinged with the metallic tang of failing organs. He pressed harder against the delicate latticework of her chest, feeling for a pulse, finding only a flutter, erratic and weak. He needed to stabilize her, and fast. He scanned the abandoned lab, his gaze sweeping across the dust-covered equipment, the flickering emergency lights casting long, distorted shadows. Broken monitors displayed gibberish code. Severed cables snaked across the floor like metallic vines. Hope dwindled with each passing second. Then, in the far corner, half buried beneath a pile of discarded components, he spotted it. A bioregulator, its casing cracked and scarred, but recognizably intact. The regulator was designed for a Grillakian, a species with vastly different physiology. James swore under his breath, a frustrated hiss escaping his lips. He didn't have time for this, but it was the only option. He grabbed the regulator, dragging it across the floor to Rhea's side. Its internal diagnostics whirred to life, spitting out error codes in a language he barely understood. He ignored them, focusing on the core components: the nutrient injectors, the oxygenators, the neural interfaces. He needed to reroute everything, adapt it to Rhea's unique biology. A metallic screech echoed from the corridor outside. The Prylorian drones. They were getting closer. Methodically, relentlessly, they were cutting through the research wing's internal doors, each breach bringing them one step closer to Rhea. James ignored them. He had to. If he didn't fix this regulator, nothing else mattered. He grabbed a handful of scavenged tools: a laser scalpel, a sonic welder, a neural probe, and began to work, his hands moving with a speed and precision born of desperation. He cut and spliced, rerouted and recalibrated, his mind racing to keep pace with the regulator's complex systems. He visualized Rhea's internal organs, her delicate neural pathways, her failing respiratory system. He had to get it right. The regulator's display flickered, spitting out a fresh wave of error codes. He cursed again, louder this time. A power cell warning flashed ominously. Depleted. Of course. He remembered something, a high-energy capacitor he'd seen in one of the dormant research pods, a relic from a long-abandoned experiment in rapid cellular regeneration. The pods were unstable, riddled with unknown contaminants. Reactivating one was a risk, a big one, but he didn't see another choice. He glanced at Rhea, her chest rising and falling shallowly. Then he scrambled to his feet and sprinted towards the research pod bay, his boots echoing on the metal floor. The bay was dark and cold, the air thick with the smell of dust and decay. The pods stood like metallic coffins, their surfaces covered in a layer of grime. He found the one he was looking for, its activation panel cracked and corroded. He took a deep breath and pressed the activation button. The pod shuddered, groaning as its internal system sputtered back to life. Warning lights flashed, bathing the bay in an eerie red glow. A hiss of escaping gas filled the air. He ripped open the access panel, ignoring the sparks that flew from the damaged wiring. He located the capacitor, a cylindrical device humming with almost unchecked energy. He ripped it free, severing the connecting cables with his laser scalpel. As he turned to leave, a klaxon blared, deafeningly loud. Red lights pulsed. A synthesized voice announced, "Security system activated. Containment breach detected. Lockdown initiated." Laser grids snapped into place, crisscrossing the corridors, blocking their escape routes. The automated security system, dormant for decades, had come back online, and it had just alerted the drones to their precise location. James cursed, his heart pounding in his chest. He raced back to the lab, the capacitor clutched tightly in his hand. He slammed it into the bioregulator, ignoring the surge of power that coursed through the device. The regulator whirred to life, its displays lighting up with a steady green glow. He quickly recalibrated it to Rhea's specific biosignature. He activated the regulator. A gentle hum filled the lab as the machine began to work, pumping nutrients into Rhea's bloodstream, oxygenating her lungs, stimulating her neural pathways. Her vital signs stabilized. The erratic flutter in her chest evened out into a steady rhythm, but she remained unconscious, her face pale and still. The final door to the lab buckled inward, groaning under the force of the drone's cutting torches. With a final hiss of escaping gas, it collapsed, revealing 3 heavily armored Prylorian units. Their multifaceted eyes glowed with cold, unwavering purpose. Plasma cannons were mounted on their shoulders, trained directly on James and Rhea. James grabbed a discarded plasma rifle from the floor, his hands shaking. He knew he was outmatched, outgunned, but he couldn't back down. He had to protect her. He positioned himself between Rhea and the drones, his body a shield against their deadly fire. The drones opened fire. Bolts of superheated plasma ripped through the air, scorching the metal walls, melting the equipment. James ducked and weaved, returning fire with the plasma rifle. He managed to disable one drone with a well-aimed shot to its optical sensors, but the others returned fire, forcing him to take cover behind an overturned table. Suddenly, a wave of energy pulsed through the lab. The lights flickered. The drones staggered, their movements becoming erratic. Rhea. James risked a glance at her. Her eyes were closed, but her body was trembling. She was emitting a powerful psychic pulse, disrupting the drone's targeting systems. He seized the opportunity. He jumped out from behind the table, firing the plasma rifle at the remaining drones. He destroyed another drone with a shot to its power core, sending it crashing to the floor in a shower of sparks. The final drone, its targeting system still malfunctioning, turned its attention to the bioregulator, its programming overriding its combat directives. It charged its plasma cannon, preparing to destroy the machine that was keeping Rhea alive. "No!" James screamed, diving across the room, throwing himself in front of the bioregulator. A searing pain ripped through his shoulder as a plasma blast slammed into him, throwing him backwards. He landed hard on the floor, his vision blurring, his consciousness fading. The surviving drone approached Rhea, its multifaceted eyes fixed on her prone form. Its programming had shifted, overriding its initial retrieval directive. It was no longer tasked with bringing her back to the Queen. Its new directive was simple, brutal: eliminate defective specimen. Rhea's eyes snapped open. They glowed with an intense blue light, brighter than anything James had ever seen. Her body began to levitate slightly above the medical cot. A scalpel, forgotten on a nearby table, lifted into the air, spinning slowly. The drone froze, its programming in conflict. Retrieval versus termination. Queen versus specimen. A garbled message crackled over the station's comm system, overriding all other transmissions. It was the Queen. Her voice, cold and metallic, filled the lab. "Terminate defective specimen," she commanded. "Retrieve right, he is valuable." Rhea focused her mind, reaching into the drone's complex decision-making matrix. Conflicting orders, loyalty to the Queen versus self-preservation, swirled within its programming. She amplified the dissonance, feeding the chaos until the drone's optical sensors flickered erratically, sparks spitting from its joints. A high-pitched whine emanated from its core, a sound that vibrated in Rhea's very bones. The drone spasmed, its movements becoming jerky and uncoordinated before freezing mid-air. James's plasma rifle lay a few feet away, discarded when he'd been struck. Rhea, with a surge of telekinetic energy born of desperation, grabbed the weapon. It was heavy, unwieldy in her small appendages, but she managed to swing it towards the disabled drone. One precise burst of plasma energy, targeted at the drone's central processing unit, ensured complete and irreversible shutdown. There would be no self-destruct sequence, no further threat from this machine. She turned back to James, her multiple eyes quickly assessing his condition. The plasma blast had seared his armor, leaving blackened, smoking patches. Through the gaps, she could sense the extent of his pain, a searing agony that threatened to overwhelm her own senses. Trauma rippled through his system, a chaotic storm of fear and adrenaline. Carefully, she reached out with her empathic abilities, not to heal, but to suppress. A gentle dampening field, just enough to quiet the screaming nerves without masking the underlying damage. She needed to know, how bad was it, and how would he react? A groan escaped James's lips. His eyelids fluttered and he blinked, struggling to focus. He saw her standing over him, the smoking plasma rifle clutched in her grasp, the deactivated drone a mangled heap behind her. A weak smile touched his lips. "You got it," he mumbled before his eyes rolled back, and he slumped back into unconsciousness. Rhea, her small frame trembling with exhaustion, knew she couldn't leave him here. This lab was compromised. Prylorian drones could arrive at any moment. She gripped his armored vest, digging her claws into the fabric for purchase, and began to drag him away. He was heavy, far heavier than she was, but adrenaline and a fierce perseverance fueled her. Reaching James's abandoned datapad, she activated the screen. The station's internal network hummed to life. Rhea quickly navigated through the menus, searching for medical information and a secure location. The station's layout swam before her eyes, a confusing maze of corridors and research labs. Then she found it, a hidden, shielded med bay designated for high-ranking personnel. Its existence was buried deep within the station's archives. It was equipped with advanced medical technology, far beyond anything available in the station's standard infirmary. Hope surged through her. With rekindled grit, Rhea dragged James towards the med bay's location. The journey seemed to take an eternity. Each meter gained a victory hard won. Finally, she reached the sealed door and, using James's access codes, forced it open. The med bay was sterile and gleaming, bathed in soft blue light. Advanced diagnostic systems hummed quietly, waiting to be activated. Rhea heaved James onto a biobed and initiated the diagnostic sequence. Scanners whirred and clicked, analyzing his injuries with clinical precision. The results appeared on a holographic display: fractured ribs, internal bleeding, severe burns. The plasma blast had caused significant damage, and the long-term effects could be devastating. But then, Rhea noticed something strange. The automated systems were initiating treatment protocols, but these were not simply designed to heal. They were designed to enhance. Physical and mental capabilities were being amplified, pushed beyond human limits. A cold dread washed over Rhea. Why would the Queen want James enhanced? What was her true purpose? Rhea accessed the med bay's logs, her claws flying across the datapad's interface. The truth hit her like a physical blow. James wasn't just a random human scientist. He had been part of a highly classified xeno-enhancement program, Project Chimera, before it was abruptly shut down. The logs revealed something even more disturbing. James possessed unique genetic markers that made him highly compatible with Prilorian genetic material. He was a perfect candidate for hybridization. Rhea understood now. The Queen didn't just want James. She wanted to use him to create a new hybrid warrior caste, combining human resilience with Prilorian strength, a force that would be unstoppable. She had to stop the automated system. If James underwent these enhancements, he would be lost. His personality erased, his mind twisted into a weapon for the Queen. Rhea reached for the control panel, her claws hovering over the shutdown button. As she disabled the automated system, a hidden compartment in the wall slid open, revealing a small metallic device, a neural inhibitor. The inhibitor was designed to suppress empathic abilities. It was meant for her, to prevent her from interfering with the Queen's plans. Suddenly, the station's comm system crackled to life, overriding all other channels. A voice, cold and imperious, filled the med bay. It was the Queen. "James Wright," the Queen's voice echoed. "I know Rhea is protecting you. She is a misguided creature, blinded by sentimentality. I offer her a place in my court, a position of honor, if she delivers you to me willingly." The Queen paused, and a chilling undercurrent of threat entered her voice. "But know this, human. If Rhea refuses, I will destroy this entire research station. Every life on it will be extinguished. Her choice determines your fate." Rhea stared at the unconscious James, his face pale and drawn. She knew she had a choice to make. Trust in James and his capabilities and face the Queen's wrath, or negotiate for her own survival. But could she live with herself if she chose the latter? The Queen's image dissolved, leaving Rhea staring at the cold, blank screen. A shudder ran through her carapace, a mix of relief and a sharp, stinging fear. Had she made the right choice? Doubt gnawed, but she forced it down. The communication channel was severed, the Queen's manipulative tendrils cut off, at least for now. Rhea replayed the Queen's offer in her mind, dissecting each phrase, each subtle inflection. the promise of safety, of resources, of a place within the Prylorian fold. It was all carefully constructed bait, designed to exploit her empathy, to leverage her connection with James. The Queen knew Rhea felt his pain, his suppressed potential, and had weaponized that knowledge. A calculated risk, Rhea thought, analyzing the subtext. The Queen wasn't offering a partnership. She was offering control, a gilded cage built on manipulation and deceit. No, she couldn't trust the Queen. James, despite his gruff exterior and the Queen's horrifying modifications, possessed a spark of genuine good, a potential for compassion that the Queen, in her rigid, hierarchical worldview, could never comprehend. Her decision was made. Saving James was paramount, even if it meant risking everything. Rhea moved with purpose to the med bay console, her multifaceted eyes scanning the complex array of options. She needed to reverse the Project Chimera enhancements to restore James to his former self. But as she initiated the full-spectrum healing sequence, a red alert flashed across the screen. System override. Level 5 clearance required. A failsafe. A cold dread settled in Rhea's thorax. The Queen had anticipated her interference, had deliberately locked down the med bay's full healing capabilities, ensuring that James remained at least partially under her control. Every avenue seemed to be a trap. A groan echoed from the bio bed. James's eyelids fluttered open, revealing unfocused eyes. He pushed himself up, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. What happened? He rasped, his voice thick with confusion. Fragmented images flickered behind his eyes, metallic tendrils, searing pain, the Queen's cold, calculating gaze. Project Chimera. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. He looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers, feeling the unfamiliar weight and density of his augmented musculature. Disorientation warred with a rising tide of nausea. Rhea approached cautiously, her antennae twitching with concern. James, you were injured, the Queen. She made you an offer. She explained the Queen's proposition, the promise of power, the threat to the station, carefully omitting her own role in shutting down Project Chimera initially. She needed to gauge his reaction to see if the Queen's influence had taken root. James listened, his brow furrowed in disbelief. As Rhea described the Queen's plan to transform him into a weapon, his face contorted with a visceral disgust. Turn me into a tool, a puppet. He banged his hand against the bio bed, the metal groaning under the force of his enhanced strength. I'd rather die than be controlled like that. The words were raw, tinged with a deep-seated aversion to manipulation, a fierce desire for autonomy that resonated with Rhea on a profound level. He turned to Rhea, his gaze searching. Why didn't you accept her offer? You could have been safe. Rhea hesitated, her internal processors whirring. Revealing her true feelings was a risk, but she trusted James, trusted the flicker of good she saw within him. Because, she said softly, your life, your potential for good, is worth more than my own safety. Before James could respond, a klaxon blared through the station, cutting through the tense silence. Red lights pulsed, bathing the med bay in an ominous glow. What is it? James demanded, his senses on high alert. Rhea accessed the station's diagnostics, the communication systems. They're being actively jammed. We can't contact anyone outside the station. James swore under his breath. He moved to the comms console, his fingers flying across the controls. She's cutting us off, isolating us. He tapped a series of commands, his expression grim. I think I've found the source of the jamming signal, a hidden transmitter module located in a restricted section of the station, somewhere I definitely wasn't supposed to be poking around. He paused, his eyes narrowing. And I'd bet my last credit that it's not just a jammer. It's a beacon, broadcasting our location to every Prylorian warship within a parsec. Rhea's empathic sense flared with alarm. A surge of Prylorian drones, a swarm of metallic predators, were rapidly approaching the station. They are coming, she confirmed, her voice tight with urgency. A full-scale assault is imminent. James didn't hesitate. Then we disable the transmitter. Buy ourselves some time, maybe disrupt the welcoming committee. He grabbed a plasma pistol from a nearby weapons locker. Let's go. The restricted section was a labyrinth of narrow corridors and reinforced bulkheads, a stark contrast to the relatively open layout of the research labs. As they approached, a web of crimson laser grids shimmered into existence, crisscrossing the hallway. Proximity mines, barely visible against the dull metal, pulsed with lethal energy. Automated security, James muttered, his eyes scanning the complex system. Looks like someone really didn't want anyone getting in here. Rhea closed her eyes, focusing her empathic abilities. She reached out, sensing the cold, calculating logic of the security system's programming. There is a pattern, she murmured, her antennae twitching. A vulnerability in their sequencing. If we move in a specific rhythm, we can bypass them. James raised an eyebrow. You can sense the security system. Rhea nodded. It is a form of intelligence, a crude one but still detectable. With Rhea guiding his movements, James navigated the laser grids with a dancer's grace, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to slip through the deadly beams with barely a millimeter to spare. Rhea, in turn, used her empathic sense to detect the proximity mines, allowing them to step around the lethal devices with uncanny precision. Their movements were fluid, coordinated, a testament to their growing trust and their combined skills. They reached the transmitter module. It was a squat, metallic cylinder, humming with barely suppressed power. A shimmering energy field surrounded it, deflecting any attempt to physically access it. Damn it, James cursed. Shielded. We need a deactivation code. Rhea focused, reaching out with her empathic sense. The code. It wasn't stored in a database or on a physical chip. It was imprinted on a neural interface, a direct link to the transmitter module's core programming. The deactivation code. It is in the mind, she said, her voice barely a whisper. A neural interface. We need direct brain contact to access it. James stared at the interface, a complex array of wires and electrodes. He knew the risks: mental contamination, Prilorian control, a complete loss of self. But he also knew they were out of options. He took a deep breath, his gaze meeting Rhea's. I'll do it. Rhea's multifaceted eyes widened with alarm. James, no, it is too dangerous. They could. I trust you, James interrupted, his voice firm. You said you believed in my potential for good. Now's your chance to prove it. Protect me, Rhea. He reached for the neural interface, his fate hanging in the balance. James settled the neural interface onto his head, the cold metal a stark contrast to the sudden heat rising in his neck. Here we go, he muttered, more to himself than Rhea. He initiated the connection. A rush of data slammed into his mind, a chaotic torrent of Prilorian tactical schematics, weapon diagnostics, and memories. He felt the weight of 1,000 battles, the cold, calculating logic of the Queen, the unwavering drive for galactic dominance. Rhea's antennae twitched rapidly. She monitored James' neural activity on a nearby console, her multifaceted eyes narrowed in concentration. A crimson alert flashed across the screen. James, something's wrong. There's invasive code. It's trying to overwrite your higher functions. Panic flared in Rhea. Focusing every ounce of her empathic ability, she reached out to James' mind, erecting a shimmering protective barrier. It was a delicate shield, woven from her own consciousness, designed to deflect the invasive code without disrupting the download of the deactivation sequence. He grit his teeth, fighting against the encroaching influence. Finally, with a surge of effort, James isolated and extracted the deactivation code. But as he did, a tendril of something else latched onto his consciousness, a fragment of the Queen's own mind, pulled along with the data stream. James ripped the interface from his head, gasping for air. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He swayed slightly, his vision blurring. Got it, he rasped, holding up the data slate containing the deactivation code. Rhea rushed to his side, her small hands fluttering around his face. "James, are you all right?" I sensed something dark. She probed gently with her empathy recoiling slightly. "There's a presence within you." He waved her concerns away, a dismissive flick of his wrist that felt uncharacteristic. "Just a bit of mental fatigue. Standard side effect. The code's secure." "That's what matters." He stood straighter, his eyes hardening. "We have a jamming signal to kill." His voice was clipped, efficient, lacking its usual warmth. Rhea stepped back, her antennae drooping. "James, you're different, colder." "Efficient, Rhea, I'm being efficient. We don't have time for sentimentality." He accessed the station's central control panel. "Let's see if our little prize works." He initiated the deactivation sequence. The pervasive jamming signal that had plagued the station for weeks vanished abruptly, replaced by the familiar hum of normal communications. "It worked," Rhea whispered, relief warring with a growing sense of dread. "But the drones, they'll be here soon." "Precisely." James' fingers flew across the control panel. "And we'll be ready." He began accessing the station's defense systems, his movements precise and economical. He was no longer the cautious scientist. He was a strategist, prioritizing survival above all else. Rhea watched him, her multifaceted eyes wide with alarm. "James, what are you doing?" "You're rerouting power to the automated turrets and the energy barriers." "Layered defense, Rhea, standard procedure, maximum efficiency." He didn't look at her, his focus entirely on the tactical display. "But you're setting them to lethal force. They'll vaporize anything that comes close." Rhea's voice trembled. "There could be survivors. We can't just kill them all." James finally turned, his gaze piercing. "Sentiment is a luxury we can't afford. This station, our lives are at stake. We use every advantage we have." He tapped a sequence on the console and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, rows of advanced weaponry gleamed under the harsh fluorescent light. Rhea gasped. "What is this? I thought this was a science station." It was a science station. Then Project Chimera came along. Things change. James picked up a pulse rifle, hefting it with a practiced ease that belied his scientific background. "We need to be prepared for any eventuality." Rhea focused her senses, reaching out to the approaching drone swarm. Her antennae drooped further. "There, larger than we anticipated, and more heavily armed." James dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand. "Then we'll meet them with equal force. Compassion has no place in war, Rhea. Only victory matters." As James continued to prepare the station's defenses, Rhea's mind raced. She couldn't let him turn into a heartless killer. While he was busy calibrating the energy barriers, Rhea secretly accessed the turret control system. With swift, precise movements, she adjusted the targeting parameters, prioritizing stun settings and disabling the lethal force option. James whirled around, his face contorted with fury. "What do you think you're doing?" He slammed the console shut, severing Rhea's connection. "You're undermining my authority. You're jeopardizing the station's defense." Tears welled in Rhea's multifaceted eyes. "James, please, you have to fight it, the Queen's influence. It's changing you. Remember who you are, remember your compassion." James stared at her, his expression a battleground between his own humanity and the Queen's cold logic. "I am doing what is necessary," he said, his voice strained. A klaxon blared through the station. Red lights flashed. "Warning, hull breach detected. Prylorian drones have penetrated the outer defenses." The assault had begun. The automated turrets, now firing at an accelerated rate, spat emerald bolts of energy. Drones detonated in showers of metallic shrapnel, their insected bodies vaporizing instantly. But for every one destroyed, two more swarmed forward, their chitinous wings buzzing like a disturbed hive. The swarm was overwhelming the defenses. James thumped his hand on the console, the metal groaning under the force. "Damn it, they're adapting too quickly." He accessed the turret control panel, his fingers flying across the holographic display. "Rhea, those non-lethal settings are useless. Override." Ria's voice, imbued with concern, echoed through the comms. "James, I still believe we can disable them without causing permanent harm." "Harm?" James spat, a vein throbbing in his forehead. "They're trying to kill us all. Enough with the damn pacifism. Lethal force authorized." He punched in the override code, his vision blurring momentarily. A wave of nausea washed over him, leaving him unsteady on his feet. Ria watched in horror as the turrets shifted their targeting parameters. The emerald bolts intensified, becoming searing beams of destructive energy. Drones were no longer merely disabled. They were obliterated, leaving behind only wisps of vaporized metal. The increased power output, however, was taking its toll. The station groaned under the strain, sections of the ceiling paneling buckling and falling to the floor. A jolt of dizziness hit James, stronger this time. He stumbled, catching himself on the console. His stomach churned and his vision swam. Ria rushed to his side, her multifaceted eyes wide with alarm. "James, you're not well. The Queen. Her influence." James waved her away, his face pale and slick with sweat. "Stress, Ria, just stress. Now isn't the time for your empathic projections." He coughed, trying to regain his composure. "Deploy Project Chimera, full-spectrum energy barriers. Now." With a flick of his wrist, the station shuddered as the advanced weaponry came online. A shimmering web of energy enveloped the station, vaporizing entire swarms of drones in an instant. The effect was devastatingly effective, but the power drain was catastrophic. Lights flickered, and alarms blared as the station's energy reserves plummeted. "James, no!" Ria cried out, her voice tinged with desperation. "You can't use that much power. It will destabilize the core." James ignored her, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Silence, Ria, we're winning." He was breathing heavily now, his hands trembling. Suddenly, a barrage of concentrated energy beams slammed into the station's exterior. The energy barriers flickered, then buckled, as a group of drones broke through, their weapons trained on the hull. "Damage report," James barked, his voice strained. "Science team, reinforce sections 4 through 7. Prioritize reactor shielding." Ria frantically scanned the sensor readings. "James, they're not targeting the reactor. They're focusing on the life support systems. The atmospheric regulators are failing." James rounded on her, his eyes blazing with an unsettling intensity. "The reactor is our priority. Without power, we're all dead. Life support is secondary." Defiance hardening her features, Ria ignored him. She darted to a nearby console, her nimble fingers flying across the controls. "I will not let them suffocate us all," she muttered. She rerouted power from non-essential systems, the hydroponics bay, the recreational facilities, to reinforce the failing life support systems. Alarms blared as systems went offline, plunging sections of the station into darkness. The drones, adapting to Ria's actions, shifted their attack patterns. Focused energy beams lanced through the station, striking power conduits and coolant lines. Localized fires erupted, spewing smoke and sparks into the already chaotic environment. James staggered, clutching his head. The nausea was overwhelming now, accompanied by a sharp, stabbing pain behind his eyes. His thoughts were fragmented, his vision blurring in and out of focus. He could feel the Queen's presence in his mind, a cold, alien intelligence eroding his will. Ria rushed to his side, her voice filled with pleading. "James, you have to fight her. Remember who you are. Remember your oath. Remember the children you saved on Kepler 186F. James recoiled from her touch as if burned. "Lies," he snarled, his voice distorted and guttural. "You're one of them, a traitor. You're siding with the enemy." He shoved her away, sending her sprawling across the floor. A blinding flash of light filled the control room as a critical power surge overloaded the station's central computer. The automated defense systems went offline, their emerald bolts ceasing abruptly. The comms went dead, cutting off all communication with the outside world. Then, with a sickening lurch, the artificial gravity flickered and died. The interior of the station plunged into disarray as equipment, debris, and bodies floated weightlessly through the air. Rhea, struggling to orient herself in the disorienting chaos, saw a drone crash through a weakened section of the wall. Its metallic body was mangled and sparking, but its multifaceted eyes still glowed with malevolent intent. As she drifted closer, she recognized something on the downed drone's chassis, a neural interface port, pulsing with faint, green light. Rhea's multifaceted eyes, each plane reflecting the flickering emergency lights, darted over the mangled drone. Her delicate manipulators, tipped with chitinous points, traced the scorched circuits, deciphering the Prilorian tech with unnerving speed. Neural interface, she finally clicked, her vocalizations tight with urgency. Capable of disrupting Queen's control, if properly aligned. James, still reeling from the Queen's initial surge, knelt gasping. His eyes, bloodshot and unfocused, tracked Rhea's movements with animalistic suspicion. The Queen tightened her grip, a vice around his temples, and a fresh wave of agony threatened to overwhelm him. Rhea approached, the salvaged interface humming softly in her grasp. "James, I can sever the connection, briefly." He flinched as she neared, a primal scream building in his throat. The Queen amplified his fear, twisting it into a weapon against Rhea. He saw not a potential savior but a monstrous extension of the hive. As Rhea reached out, her hand trembling, James roared, a sound ripped from the depths of his soul. He swung blindly, his augmented strength amplified by the Queen's rage. Rhea, caught off guard, slammed against the far wall, the neural interface skittering across the deck. A klaxon blared, its shrill cry cutting through the Queen's mental assault. Red lights pulsed erratically. "Life support failing," the station's automated voice announced, its tone flat and devoid of hope. "Oxygen levels critical. Containment breach imminent." James, momentarily freed from the Queen's iron will by the sudden cacophony, clutched his head, his vision swimming. He had to warn her. "Rhea, listen." He choked out, his voice ragged. "Chimera, failsafe, Queen, override." Rhea, struggling to her feet, stared at him, confusion warring with concern in her multifaceted eyes. James fought to maintain his fragile grip on reality. The Queen was clawing her way back in, but he had to make her understand. "Failsafe, organic controller, Queen overrides." He spat the words out, each syllable a victory against the encroaching darkness. "She'll use me to destroy it all." Understanding dawned in Rhea's gaze, sharp and cold. The Queen wasn't just trying to reclaim the weapon. She was going to weaponize James himself, turning him into a walking doomsday device. "We must block Queen's signals," Rhea stated, her voice regaining its characteristic steadiness, "while you initiate failsafe." James laughed, a hollow, broken sound. Failsafe is a death sentence either way. But then his tone shifted, infused with a desperate persistence. "Do it, Rhea. Do it now or we're all dead." Rhea retrieved the neural interface, her delicate manipulators working with impossible speed. She scavenged components from the drone's wreckage, rerouting power conduits and recalibrating frequency emitters. Prilorian neural networks. Complex. Queen's signal. Must disrupt. James staggered towards the Chimera terminal, each step a monumental effort against the Queen's growing control. His hand hovered over the activation rune. "I can't promise I can hold her off for long," he grunted. "Once I start the sequence." Rhea didn't respond, her focus absolute. She knew the risks. The Prilorian Queen's signals, if not blocked, would turn him into a weapon of mass destruction. Finally, she held up the modified interface, its salvaged components glinting ominously. "Ready, disruptive frequency. Based on Prilorian neural patterns. Imperfect, but best I can manage." James thumped his hand onto the activation rune. The terminal flared to life, displaying a complex sequence of cascading numbers. A synthesized voice announced, "Chimera failsafe initiated. Self-destruct sequence commencing. T-5 minutes." The Queen unleashed her full fury. Agony exploded in James's skull, amplified 1,000-fold. He screamed, a raw, animalistic sound that echoed through the failing station. He tried to pull away from the terminal, but his limbs were locked in place, puppets dancing to the Queen's tune. Rhea lunged forward, clamping the neural interface onto the back of James's neck. A jolt of raw energy surged through him, a chaotic symphony of disruptive frequencies tearing through his mind. James collapsed, his body convulsing violently. The Queen fought back, her mental tendrils lashing out against the intrusive signals. He was trapped in a psychic tug-of-war, his consciousness a battlefield between two alien wills. The countdown continued, T-minus 4 minutes, 30 seconds. But the station's lights flickered violently, and the hum of the failsafe mechanism faltered. "Warning," the automated voice announced, its tone strained. "Power levels critical. Failsafe mechanism may be compromised." Rhea, her multifaceted eyes wide with concentration, saw the readings. The power drain from the neural interface, coupled with the station's failing systems, was threatening to shut down the failsafe entirely. They were running out of time and options. A solution presented itself, terrifying in its implications. A merging of systems, a gamble beyond comprehension. The countdown continued, T-minus 3 minutes. James, through the pain, found a moment of clarity. "Rhea," he gasped, his voice strained. "Middle ground, genetic systems, merge." The screen went black. The station lights flickered back to life, stuttering, casting long, dancing shadows across the grimy metal floor. Emergency lights hummed, a sickly yellow glow barely cutting through the oppressive darkness. A klaxon wailed, a relentless, piercing shriek that echoed through the cramped corridors. The neural interface, overloaded, sparked and hissed, the smell of ozone thick in the air. Rhea, her small frame trembling, reached out, her chitinous fingers brushing against James' forehead. The Queen was still there, a faint, receding echo in the back of James' mind like a phantom limb. But the connection, the suffocating control, had loosened. A jolt, unexpected and powerful, surged through Rhea. It wasn't just the Queen's fading presence she sensed, but something more, something new. The genetic merging, the forced symbiosis, had amplified her empathic abilities. She could feel the Queen's residual influence, the insidious whispers still clinging to James' thoughts like cobwebs in a forgotten corner. The klaxon intensified, joined by a synthesized voice, cold and impersonal. "Warning. Life support systems failing. Oxygen levels critical. Immediate action required." The voice repeated the message, each iteration more urgent than the last. Rhea scrambled to James' side, her multifaceted eyes scanning his face. He was still unconscious, his breathing shallow and ragged. She reached for the med scanner, her nimble fingers fumbling with the unfamiliar human technology. The scanner beeped, displaying a string of numbers and graphs, stable but critical. His human body was fighting the forced integration of Prylorian genetics, the alien enhancement straining his physiology to its breaking point. He was alive, but for how long? Desperate, Rhea pressed her hand against his cheek, channeling her energy, her will, into his broken form. She focused, pushing past the pain, the fear, the lingering echoes of the Queen. This time, instead of a cold, alien presence, she found something else. A landscape of fragmented memories, of swirling emotions, a subconscious world both familiar and utterly foreign. James stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He blinked, confusion clouding his gaze. What happened? He winced, clutching his head. The life support, it's failing. A wave of profound sadness washed over him, a deep, aching grief that resonated with Rhea's own fear. The oxygen scrubbers, James rasped, struggling to sit up. They failed, power surge. Chimera failsafe. He shook his head, trying to clear the fog in his mind. Primary and backup, offline. He looked around the dimly lit chamber, his eyes filled with despair. Rhea, driven by a desperate urgency, began to assist, James focusing on the mangled human tech while Rhea examined the Prylorian systems. Sparks flew as James rerouted power conduits, his movements precise despite his weakened state. Rhea, using her smaller, more agile limbs, navigated the intricate network of bioluminescent fibers that controlled the Prylorian components. Suddenly, the Chimera weapon, dormant until now, began to pulse with an eerie, rhythmic energy. The lights flickered again, more violently this time, and several of the station's systems sputtered and died. Rhea recoiled, sensing something wrong. The weapon, it wasn't just a bomb. It was something else entirely, something alive. The Queen's presence flickered again, a fleeting whisper in James' mind. Rhea sensed her, a desperate, grasping tendril trying to regain control. But Rhea was ready, her enhanced empathy allowing her to anticipate the Queen's moves, to shield James' mind from her insidious influence. James, his face grim, pointed to a section of the wall. Hidden maintenance tunnel. Secondary power generator. It's near the Chimera core, though. He hesitated, his voice filled with doubt. As they approached the tunnel entrance, the floor buckled beneath their feet. A section of the ceiling collapsed, showering them with dust and debris. The tunnel entrance, once a narrow passage, was now a jagged, impassable ruin. They were trapped. James stared at the rubble, his face etched with despair. "It's no use," he muttered. Then his eyes widened, a dawning horror replacing the despair. The Chimera, it's not designed to destroy, it's designed to transform. He swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. To terraform, to convert planets into habitable environments for Prylorians, at the cost of existing life. Rhea, her empathic senses heightened, felt it too. The Chimera weapon wasn't just a machine, it was a catalyst, a bio-engineered engine of planetary conversion. And now she realized she could feel its power, its purpose, its potential. The genetic merging had given her the ability to interface with the weapon's core, to influence its transformation process. The Queen's voice, stronger now, echoed in Rhea's mind. "Complete the process, little one. Save yourself. Save your people." The Queen's tone was honeyed, but beneath it was a steel threat. James looked at Rhea, his eyes pleading. The fate of the station, the fate of the planet, perhaps even the fate of the stars, rested on their shoulders. They faced a choice: complete the transformation, saving themselves but condemning countless others to oblivion, or find another way, a desperate, impossible way, to stop the Chimera weapon and preserve the life that already existed. The screen went black. The tunnel groaned, a drawn-out shriek of tortured metal and fracturing rock. Dust rained down, stinging James's eyes as another section of the ceiling gave way, slamming into the passage ahead. The beam of his headlamp danced frantically, illuminating only a few feet of the increasingly claustrophobic space. Oxygen was getting thin. He could feel it in the shallow burn of his lungs. "Damn it," he muttered, coughing. "This whole place is coming down." He consulted his wrist-mounted display, cycling through the station's schematics. There's gotta be another way. He tapped furiously, zooming in on a section of the tunnel network he'd always considered a dead end. Wait a minute. Rhea clutched at his arm, her chitinous fingers digging into his suit. Her multifaceted eyes were wide, unfocused. She is making it worse," Rhea rasped, her voice strained. "The Queen, the pulses, they tear at the stone." James swore under his breath. The Chimera weapon. The Queen was amplifying its power, using it to destabilize the entire area. He tightened his grip on his pulse rifle. "We need to move. Now." "There's a service tunnel barely big enough and structurally unsound, according to the original surveys, but it's our only shot." He pointed to a narrow crevice in the wall, almost hidden by fallen debris. "Think you can squeeze through?" Rhea nodded weakly, but as she did, her body convulsed. Her eyes rolled back in her head and she gasped, a sound like tearing fabric. Vision slammed into her consciousness. Vibrant ecosystems dissolving into barren wastelands, lush forests replaced by the stark, geometric architecture of Prylorian hives, the very air turning acrid and lifeless. A wave of despair washed over her, threatening to drown her in the Queen's twisted vision. "Rhea, what is it?" James gripped her shoulders, shaking her gently. She blinked, focusing on him with a visible effort. "The planet, she shows me. What the Queen wants to do, turn it into another Prylos." "I know," James said grimly. "That's why we have to stop her, come on." He pulled her towards the crevice. The alternate route was even worse than the blueprint suggested. The walls were cracked and crumbling, and the air hung thick with the smell of ozone and decay. Halfway through, they were stopped by a rockslide, a jumbled mess of stone and twisted metal. "Great," James said, his voice tight with frustration. "Just great." He ran his hand along a jagged piece of metal, his expression hardening with purpose. "I might be able to blast through this." He began rummaging through his pack, pulling out a coil of wire, a power cell, and a handful of salvaged explosives. "Stand back." Rhea watched him, her brow furrowed with concern. "Is that safe?" "Define safe," James replied, his grin tight. He worked quickly, his fingers moving with practiced ease, stripping wires and connecting components. He had learned a lot about explosives during his time with the Corps. It's a controlled demolition, mostly. He set the makeshift charge against the rockslide and armed it. Everyone down. The explosion was deafening, a concussive blast that shook the entire tunnel. Debris rained down and a cloud of dust and smoke billowed out, choking the air. When the dust settled, a hole had been blasted through the rockslide, but the tunnel supports around it were visibly weakened. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ceiling, and a low, ominous rumble filled the air. "Damn it," James coughed, waving away the smoke. "I didn't account for the structural instability." Then a new smell hit him, acrid, metallic, and intensely irritating to the nostrils. His eyes began to water and his throat burned. Rhea gasped, her multifaceted eyes widening in alarm. "The gas! From the weapon, it leaks through the cracks." James knew what she meant. The Chimera's transformation process released toxic byproducts, pollutants that could kill in minutes. He scrambled for his pack, pulling out a spare air filter. "We need to seal our suits now." He ripped the filter apart, extracting the absorbent material inside. He then began improvising, stuffing the material into his helmet's ventilation system, creating a makeshift filter. It wouldn't be perfect, but it was better than nothing. "This'll buy us some time. Hurry." As they pressed on, the tunnel seemed to close in around them, the darkness pressing against their faces. The Queen's mental assault intensified, a relentless barrage of images and emotions. Rhea staggered, clutching her head, her body trembling. "A perfect Prylos," the Queen's voice echoed in her mind, seductive and cruel. "No weakness, no dissent, only order and purpose. Join me, Rhea, rule with me. You will be honored, powerful. Your empathy will guide us, shape us. Together we will forge a new era." James saw Rhea faltering, her eyes glazed over, her movements sluggish. He grabbed her face, forcing her to look at him. "Rhea, snap out of it. Don't listen to her." He reached into his memory, searching for something, anything, to break the Queen's hold. He thought of his childhood, of his mother's garden, of the vibrant colors and the sweet scent of the flowers. He focused on the image, projecting it into his mind, sharing it with Rhea. "Remember," he said, his voice urgent. "Remember the beauty, the life, all of it. The things worth fighting for. She wants to destroy it all, Rhea. Don't let her." He showed her the memory of his mother's garden, the smell of roses, the buzzing of bees, the warmth of the sun on his skin. The simple, pure joy of existence. He focused on the memory of his mother's hands, rough and calloused from years of working the soil, but gentle and loving as she cupped his face. Rhea gasped, her eyes widening. The Queen's influence seemed to recede, replaced by a flicker of recognition, of hope. "The flowers," she whispered, "the colors." Empowered by James's support and the vivid memory, Rhea began to fight back. She focused her own empathy, pushing against the Queen's mental intrusion, creating a shield of resistance. But the effort drained her, leaving her weak and trembling. They reached the end of the tunnel. It opened into a vast chamber, the heart of the Chimera weapon. Swirling energy crackled in the air, illuminating complex Prilorian technology. A network of interconnected resonators pulsed with power, feeding energy into the weapon's core. The air hummed with almost unchecked destructive potential. "This is it," James said, his voice barely a whisper. "The core chamber, the energy," Rhea gasped, her voice strained. "It is overwhelming." James scanned the chamber, his eyes narrowed in concentration. "The resonators, they're amplifying the energy pulses. If we can disrupt them, we can weaken the weapon." He began formulating a plan, his mind racing, calculating trajectories and energy flows. As James worked, the Queen turned her attention to him, directing the weapon's defenses against him. Beams of lethal energy lanced out, searing the air where he had been standing moments before. Rhea, despite her weakened state, sensed the attacks before they happened. Her empathy allowed her to anticipate the weapon's movements, providing James with crucial warnings. "Behind you, above." To the left, James dodged and weaved, his movements fluid and precise, avoiding the deadly energy beams. He disabled one resonator, then another, but the weapon's defenses adapted, becoming faster, more unpredictable. The Queen unleashed a final, devastating mental attack on Rhea, attempting to completely overwhelm her and seize control of the weapon. Rhea screamed, her body arching in agony. The energy in the chamber seemed to coalesce around her, pulling her towards the weapon's core. James saw the struggle in Rhea's eyes, the conflict between her will and the Queen's control. He knew that Rhea was facing a terrible choice: use her connection to the Chimera to shut it down completely, potentially sacrificing herself, or succumb to the Queen's control and doom the planet. He couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't let her sacrifice herself. Without hesitation, James lunged forward, grabbing Rhea's hand. He knew it was a desperate move, a gamble with his own life, but he had to sever her connection to the weapon. He pulled with all his strength, tearing Rhea away from the swirling energy. The screen cuts to black as a surge of energy erupts from the Chimera core. The world swam back into focus, a nauseating blend of flickering emergency lights and the acrid tang of ozone. James groaned, his head throbbing, and pushed himself up, his suit alarms blaring a cacophony of warnings. He tasted blood, and the metallic tang mixed with the ozone. Rhea. His gaze snapped to where she lay, still connected to the Chimera's core by those shimmering tendrils of energy. She was conscious, he could sense it, but weakened. The weapon, still active, she thought, the words faint and fragile in his mind. Energy, unstable, fluctuating. He scrambled to her side, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Rhea, are you all right?" He reached for the connection points, desperate to sever them, but hesitated. He didn't understand enough about the weapon, didn't want to hurt her further. Her violet eyes flickered open, meeting his. The Queen, her influence, diminished. He ran a diagnostic scan on his wrist-mounted console. The readings were chaotic, a jumbled mess of corrupted energy signatures. The core containment field, already weakened, was failing. He could see it now, shimmering distortions in the air, like heat rising off a forge. Then, a low, guttural hum resonated through the chamber, growing in intensity. Energy pulsed outwards from the failing containment field, washing over the alien flora clinging to the chamber walls. The plants writhed, twisting into grotesque shapes, their colors shifting from vibrant greens and blues to sickly yellows and browns. Small, insect-like creatures scuttled across the floor, their movements erratic, their bodies sprouting bizarre growths. Rhea gasped, her small frame trembling. Pain. So much pain. The planet. It's suffering. Her empathic abilities were amplifying the agony of the mutating life forms, adding another layer of distress to her already weakened state. "I have to stabilize the field," James said, his voice tight with urgency. He ripped a panel off a nearby console, exposing a tangle of wires and circuits. Ignoring the warning screaming in his ears, he began to reroute power, jury-rigging a temporary stabilizer. Sparks flew, and the smell of burning plastic filled the air. He managed to divert enough power to reinforce the containment field, buying them a few precious minutes. The energy pulses subsided, and the mutated flora slowed its grotesque transformation, but the relief was temporary. "Where is the failure point?" he asked, his voice strained. "Can you sense it?" Rhea closed her eyes, focusing her energy, her brow furrowed in concentration. A disruption. Deep within the core, a failsafe. James scanned the weapon schematics, his fingers flying across the console. Failsafe? What kind of failsafe? Pin Orion, built in to destroy, if corrupted. His eyes widened. But that would release the energy, it would destroy the planet. It is designed to fail, to contain at all costs. He traced the failsafe circuitry back to its source, a heavily shielded control panel located deep within the Chimera's core. But something else caught his eye, a secondary signal pulsing outwards from the same location. That signal. He muttered, his blood turning to ice. "It's a beacon, an emergency beacon." Rhea gasped, her eyes snapping open. "The Queen, she showed me. Mind control, emergency beacon." James understood. The failsafe was designed to prevent the weapon from falling into enemy hands, but it also served as a distress signal, alerting the Prilorians to the weapon's compromised state. "Reinforcements," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "They're sending reinforcements." Rhea's eyes widened in fear. A warship. Approaching, elite warriors. Coming, he checked his sensors. A blip barely perceptible but growing larger with alarming speed. A Prilorian warship, powerful and heavily armed, was on its way. "We have to disable that beacon," James said, his mind racing. "If more Prilorians arrive, it's over, for us, for this planet." But disabling the beacon meant accessing that heavily secured control panel, risking a complete systems failure. And even if they succeeded, they were still trapped, with a warship bearing down on them. He looked at Rhea, her face pale and drawn, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and dedication. The tendrils of energy connecting her to the weapon pulsed with a malevolent light. "We have to choose," he said, his voice heavy with dread. "Stabilize the core, knowing the Prilorians are coming, or risk it all to disable the failsafe." Rhea looked at him, her violet eyes filled with a profound sadness. She could sense his fear, his desperation, but also his unwavering grit to protect her. She could feel the planet's pain, the suffering of its mutated life forms. "I can reconnect," she thought, her voice barely a whisper in his mind. "Turn off the beacon. Save the planet." "Save you?" James stared at her, his heart clenching. "No," he said, his voice firm, unwavering. "Absolutely not." "James, I won't let you do it, Rhea. I won't let you sacrifice yourself." He remembered finding her in the recyclery chute, broken and discarded. He remembered the fear in her eyes, the gradual blossoming of trust. He wouldn't let her become a casualty of this war. He turned back to the console, his fingers flying across the keys. "There's another way," he said, his voice grim. "A final modification, a complete overload." "James, no, you'll be incinerated." "It's the only way to be sure," he said, his gaze fixed on the schematics. "To stop the beacon, to contain the energy. To buy this planet a chance." He began rerouting power to the Chimera's resonators, preparing to unleash a cataclysmic surge of energy. As he worked, a new signal emanated from Rhea, a wave of pure, unadulterated energy that resonated through the chamber. It wasn't the corrupted energy of the Chimera, but something else entirely. The core's energy fluctuations calmed, the violent pulses smoothing into a steady hum. The containment field, weakened but still holding, flickered with renewed strength. The outburst of energy was not completely without effect, as the chamber walls melt and crumble. Pieces of the walls fell to the floor with a splash. Rhea gasped, her eyes wide with surprise. I don't know how. I can calm the core, but the beacon, I can't turn it off." James's fingers hovered over the resonator controls, his breath catching in his throat. The readings were spiking erratically. "I don't like this," he muttered, pulling back. "Something's not right." Before he could elaborate, Rhea surged forward, her small form trembling. A low hum emanated from her, growing in intensity until it vibrated the very air. Light flared around her, coalescing into a shimmering corona. She wasn't modifying the resonators, she was resonating with them. A wave of pure energy pulsed outwards, slamming into the chimera core. The chaotic energy field flickered, then stabilized, the violent fluctuations smoothing into a steady thrum. But the effort cost Rhea dearly. The corona faded and she slumped against the console, her breathing shallow and ragged. James swore, scooping her up in his arms. "Rhea, what did you do?" He carried her to a nearby medical bay, his movements urgent. He laid her gently on the bio bed, his fingers flying over the diagnostics. Her energy levels were critically low. I felt it," she whispered, her voice weak. "The core, it was screaming. I calmed it." James administered a nutrient solution, his brow furrowed with concern. He ran a full-spectrum scan, monitoring her vital signs. "You stabilized the core, Rhea, but at what cost?" Rhea closed her multifaceted eyes. "The failsafe, the beacon, I can sense it, the control panel. It is deep within the core." James stared at her, incredulous. "You can sense it? How?" "The core, it is like a mind. I can feel its pathways." She paused, gathering her strength. "The path to the control panel, it is blocked by the flora, mutated." James knew what she meant. The chimera core's energy had warped the local plant life into something monstrous. He had seen the reports: aggressive vines, toxic spores, mobile carnivorous plants, a living nightmare. He accessed the station's database, pulling up the xenobotanical analysis. The toxins are complex but primarily protein-based. "I might be able to synthesize a temporary antidote, but it won't last long." Time was running out. The Prilorian warship was getting closer, their intentions undoubtedly hostile. He couldn't let Rhea's sacrifice be in vain. "All right," James said, voice firm. "We're going in. I'll need a level 3 biohazard suit and a security escort." He contacted Commander Alara, requesting assistance. A few minutes later, Security Officer Reyes, clad in full protective gear, met them at the airlock. As they moved towards the core access tunnel, a chime sounded over the comms. "Warning," a synthetic voice announced. "Unidentified vessel approaching. Designation, Prilorian warship. Threat level, high." James glanced at the tactical display. The approaching vessel wasn't a scout ship as they had initially assumed. It was a full-scale warship dripping with weapons. "Damn it," James muttered. "They're not playing around." They reached the entrance to the mutated flora zone. The air hung thick with a cloying, sickly sweet odor. Twisted vines, pulsating with bioluminescent light, snaked across the walls and floor. They hadn't gone 10 meters when a metallic screech echoed through the tunnel. A figure lurched from the shadows, a Prilorian drone, but warped and twisted. Its chitinous armor was cracked and overgrown with fungal growths, its weapon arm replaced by a mass of writhing tendrils. "Energy pulses must have scrambled its programming," Reyes said, raising her weapon. "It's hostile." Rhea stepped forward, her hands outstretched. "Wait, I can feel its confusion, pain." She tried to project a calming wave, but it had no effect. The drone emitted another screech and lunged, its tendrils whipping towards them. "Rhea, get back!" James yelled, activating his EMP generator. A wave of electromagnetic energy washed over the drone, causing it to seize and collapse, its corrupted systems overloaded. But the EMP had unintended consequences. The bioluminescent vines around them flickered violently, and the air grew thicker, heavier with spores. "The EMP destabilized the environment," Reyes said grimly. "The toxins are intensifying." They pressed on, deeper into the mutated flora zone. Finally, they reached the control panel. It was heavily shielded, surrounded by a pulsating energy field, and guarding it was something new. It was vaguely reptilian, but its flesh was swollen and distorted, covered in weeping sores. Jagged spines erupted from its back, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent green light. It was clearly in agony, its body racked with tremors. Rhea gasped, recoiling slightly. It's suffering, immense pain. She stepped forward, her voice soft. I can feel it. It doesn't want to hurt us, it's just protecting itself. James stared at the creature, his hand hovering over his weapon. He couldn't sense what Rhea was feeling, but he saw the creature's pain, its desperation. Maybe, just maybe, Rhea was right. Raise, hold your fire, James ordered. Let's see if we can talk to it. Rhea approached the creature slowly, cautiously. We don't want to hurt you, she said, her voice filled with empathy. We just need to reach the control panel. The creature snarled but didn't attack. Rhea continued to project her feelings of compassion, of understanding. After a tense moment, the creature lowered its head, its glowing eyes dimming slightly. It says it guards the panel to protect itself from the pain, Rhea translated, her voice trembling. If we promise to release it from its suffering, it will let us pass. James hesitated. It was a gamble, but they had no other choice. All right, he said. We agree. We'll release you from your pain. The creature shifted aside, allowing them access to the control panel. James quickly set to work, rerouting the energy flow, bypassing the security protocols. He modified the panel to emit a counter signal, designed to disrupt the failsafe beacon. As the beacon signal began to fade, Rhea approached the mutated creature. She reached out, placing her hand on its grotesque head. A wave of pure empathy washed over the creature, soothing its ravaged nerves, easing its torment. Its body relaxed, its tremors ceased, and its glowing eyes faded to black. It let out a final, shuddering breath and collapsed, finally at peace. Suddenly, a harsh voice boomed over the comms. Unidentified vessel, you are in violation of Prilorian space. You have interfered with a critical beacon signal. Explain yourselves. James straightened, his face grim. The Prilorians had detected the disruption. You will surrender the defective Offspring and the Chimera core immediately, the voice continued, cold and implacable. Failure to comply will result in immediate planetary bombardment. We will not yield. James pounded his fist on the comm console, the metal groaning under the impact. Now, he barked, initiate the surge. The station shuddered. Lights flickered erratically, casting dancing shadows across the control room. A low, guttural hum resonated through the metal framework as the Chimera core momentarily strained, its energy signature spiking before settling back into a controlled thrum. Onboard the Prilorian warship Venator, alarms blared. Energy surge detected, Commander, a drone officer reported, chitinous fingers flying across the console. Originating from within the research station, they're attempting to mask their location. Commander Lyra, a Prilorian officer whose mandibles were set in a permanent scowl, her multifaceted eyes glinting with cold calculation, turned from the holographic display. Fools, she hissed. Prepare boarding procedures. They cannot hide from the Venator. A private comm signal flashed on her console. Open a secure channel, she ordered. To the station. I wish to speak with the defective directly. Back in the research station, a Priority 1 signal pinged on the comm system. James frowned. Who is this? It's for me, Rhea whispered, her usually vibrant carapace dull with apprehension. James hesitated, then nodded. Patch it through, but keep it secure. I want a recording of everything. Rhea stepped forward, her delicate antennae twitching nervously. The comm panel shimmered, resolving into a holographic image of Lyra. The resemblance was undeniable, the same sharp features, the same piercing gaze, but hardened by years of military discipline. Rhea, Lyra's voice was surprisingly soft, almost pleading. Sister, return to the colony. You can be fixed, reintegrated. You belong with us. Rhea stood firm, her small frame radiating a quiet strength. I have found a new home, Lyra, a new purpose. I am not defective. Lyra's expression hardened. You do not understand the gravity of your situation. The Queen. She has deemed your genetic divergence a threat to the Prilorian bloodline. She has ordered your extermination. Genetic fascism, is that it? James cut in, his voice tinged with disgust. You would kill your own sister for not fitting your twisted ideal of purity. You will not touch her. I will protect Rhea. Lyra's mandibles clicked in anger. Human, you interfere in matters you cannot comprehend. This is a family matter. The comm channel abruptly severed, replaced by a chilling silence. Prepare for immediate boarding, Lyra's voice echoed through the Venator's comm system. No survivors. Inside the research station's makeshift war room, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Dr. Wright, a security officer, his face pale, stepped forward. With all due respect, are you sure this is the right decision, harboring this alien against the entire Prylorian war machine? The consequences of not protecting her are far greater, James retorted, his voice ringing with conviction. Rhea's abilities, her empathy, it could bridge the gap between our species, between countless others. Are we so willing to sacrifice that potential because we're afraid? He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. Besides, what kind of message does that send to the galaxy? We cave to bullies. We abandon those in need. I refuse. A flicker of hope ignited in the eyes of a few of the staff. A young xenolinguist who had been studying Rhea's language spoke up. Dr. Wright is right. We can't just hand her over. We have to try. Suddenly, a klaxon blared through the station. Breach detected in Sector 4, Prylorian boarding drones incoming. James swore under his breath. Damn it, okay, listen up. I need everyone at their stations, prepare for a fight, and someone get me a secure comm channel. There's got to be an emergency frequency we can use. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. Think, Wright, think. There was that old trade route. The Aurora. Rostova. Minutes later, after frantic searching through archived data logs, he found a hidden emergency channel leading to a neutral trading vessel operating in a nearby star system. He patched it through, his fingers crossed. A gruff voice crackled over the comm. This is the Aurora, Captain Eva Rostova speaking. What's your emergency? Captain Rostova, this is Dr. James Wright at Research Station Chimera. We are under attack by a Prylorian warship. We need immediate extraction. There was a long pause. Prylorians, huh? That's a bit outside my pay grade, Doc. I'm a trader, not a soldier. What's in it for me? Access to the Chimera Core's data logs, James said quickly. Complete and unrestricted access. Plus any technology we can salvage before they breach the station. Safe passage to a neutral planet, that's the deal. Rostova considered for a moment. The core logs. All right, Doc, you got yourself a deal, but you better be worth the risk. I'm setting a course for your location. ETA 4 hours. Try to stay alive until then. The comm channel went silent. James turned back to the war room, his face grim. They're coming. All hands brace for impact. Outside, the first wave of Prylorian boarding drones slammed against the research station's outer hull, their energy weapons cutting through the weakened defenses without difficulty. Inside, James, Rhea, and the remaining loyal staff prepared for a desperate last stand, the fate of a unique individual, and perhaps the future of interspecies relations, hanging in the balance. The klaxons blared, a guttural shriek that vibrated through the station's metal bones. Red emergency lights strobed, painting the sterile corridors in a hellish glow. The first wave of Prylorian boarding drones, metallic scarabs filled with weaponry, had punched through the outer airlock. A synthesized voice, cold and devoid of emotion, announced, "Internal breach imminent. T-5 minutes to complete structural compromise." James, his face grim, worked furiously at the central console, fingers flying across the holographic display. "Damn it, we're running on fumes," he muttered, rerouting power from the hydroponics bay and the automated sanitation systems. Sparks flew from a junction box as he forced the overload. That should buy us some time, reinforcing security barriers in sectors 4 and 7. The station groaned under the strain, the lights flickering ominously. Rhea, clinging to James's arm, her large, multifaceted eyes wide with fear, trembled slightly. They are moving towards Sector 2, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the alarms. A large group, patrolling, anticipating a response at Sector 4. James's head snapped up. They're hurting us, clever bastards. He quickly recalibrated his strategy, inputting a new sequence into the console. Time for a little surprise. He initiated the program. A series of high-frequency EMP bursts rippled through Sectors 2 and 5. 3 drones went down instantly, their metallic bodies convulsing as their systems fried. A satisfying hiss filled the comms. That's for starters. But the respite was brief. A group of scientists, led by the usually mild-mannered Dr. Aris Thorne, blocked James's path. Thorne's face was etched with worry, his voice imbued with desperation. James, this has gone far enough. You have to surrender the alien. It's the only way to save the station. Surrender her, James scoffed, his hand instinctively moving to the energy pistol holstered at his hip. Are you kidding me, Aris? We can't just hand her over to those butchers. But what choice do we have? Thorne pleaded, gesturing to the flickering lights and the distant sounds of tearing metal. They'll destroy everything. We have families here, James, lives to protect. And what kind of life will Rhea have if we give her up? James countered, his voice rising in anger. She's not just some specimen, Aris. She's intelligent, she's compassionate. She could be an ally, we can't just throw her away. He tried to persuade them, look, I have a plan. With Rhea's help, we can get off this station. We just need to hold them off a little longer. Thorne shook his head, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. It's too late, James. It's over. He nodded to one of his followers, who quickly accessed a nearby control panel. A moment later, the station's communication system went dead, plunging the corridor into near silence. What did you do? James roared, lunging towards Thorne, but the other scientists stepped forward, blocking his path. Rhea, sensing the turmoil within Thorne, reached out, her small hand gently touching his arm. PDRSC, Dr. Thorne, she said, her voice soft but firm. I understand your fear, but I can help your people. And mine. There does not have to be bloodshed. Her words seemed to resonate with some of Thorne's follower, a young woman, Dr. Lena Reyes stepped forward, her face etched with doubt. Aris, I don't know, maybe she's right, maybe there's another way. Thorne hesitated, his internal conflict palpable. The rift within the dissenting group was widening. James seized the opportunity. Lena's right, we can fix this, but we need to restore the comms. Can you help me? Lena nodded, a flicker of hope in her eyes. I know the bypass codes, let's go. As Lena worked to restore the communication system, James turned to Rhea. We need to get out of here. I know a way through the maintenance tunnels. It's our best shot at reaching Rostova. But they will be waiting, Rhea warned, her eyes darting nervously. Commander Lyra, she anticipates your movements. She is using a shadow to hide the others. A cloaking device, James realized, his face hardening. Damn it, she's good. He thought for a moment, tapping his chin. All right, Rhea, I need you to focus. Can you sense them through the cloak? Rhea closed her eyes, concentrating. Yes, I can feel them. Faint, but I can guide you. Following Rhea's guidance, James, Lena, and a handful of scientists who had sided with them navigated the labyrinthine maintenance tunnels. The air was thick with dust and the stench of stale coolant. Pipes hissed and groaned, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. Suddenly, Rhea stopped, her body rigid. Wait, drones. Ahead, small group, they are close. James raised his energy pistol, his heart pounding in his chest. Everyone behind me, Lena, stay back. A moment later, 3 Prylorian drones emerged from the shadows, their weapons charged and ready. A brief but intense firefight erupted. James, using his knowledge of their anatomy, targeted the drones' vulnerable joints, disabling 2 with precise shots. Rhea, darting between cover, used her agility to evade their attacks, relaying their positions to James. The 3rd drone lunged at Rhea, but James tackled it, sending it crashing into a wall. He finished it off with a final blast from his pistol. Breathing heavily, James helped Rhea to her feet. You okay, kid? Rhea nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, James, we fight well. Together, they pressed on, finally reaching the secluded docking bay, but their hopes were dashed. The bay was empty. "Rostova's not here," Lena said, her voice filled with despair. James accessed the docking bay's external comms. "Rostova, this is right. Do you read? What's your ETA?" A crackling voice responded. "Right, this is Rostova. We've been delayed, ran into a Prylorian patrol. We're on our way, but it's going to be a while." As the comms went silent, a new alarm blared. Red lights flashed and the heavy docking bay doors began to close. "Sealing off Sector 9, the synthesized voice announced. "Internal breach imminent." James whirled around, his eyes widening in horror. A specialized boarding drone, armed with a cutting torch, was rapidly approaching the docking bay doors. Lyra had anticipated their escape route. "We're trapped," Lena cried, her voice rising in panic. The docking bay doors slammed shut, sealing them inside. Prylorian drones were closing in. Their escape route had been cut off. James's fingers danced across the docking bay door's cold, unyielding surface. The cutting torch outside whined, a sound that chewed at his nerves more than the metal it devoured. "Secondary access panel," he muttered, tracing the barely visible outline with a grimy fingertip. "Damn Prylorian engineering. Always a back door, never a clear path." Rhea trembled beside him, her multifaceted eyes wide. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through her chitinous frame. She is not patient," Rhea whispered, her voice a raspy echo in the cavernous bay. The Lyra, she wants us. Gone, quickly." James cursed under his breath. Lyra's impatience meant less time to crack the override. He stabbed at the panel, his Omni tool spitting out lines of code. Almost there. The cutting torch flared brighter, showering the bay in molten sparks. He pounded his fist on the panel. "Got it." A cascade of alien symbols flooded the screen. He input the override sequence, a complex algorithm he'd memorized from countless hours studying Prylorian schematics. The panel flashed green, then red, a klaxon blared, deafening in the confined space. Red lights pulsed, bathing the docking bay in a hellish glow. Heavy blast doors slammed shut, sealing off the bay from the rest of the station. The cutting torch outside went silent. "Security lockdown," James snarled. "Damn it, Thorne." He knew it. Thorne, the station's director, always playing both sides. Rhea whimpered, clutching at James's arm. What is happening?" "Thorne is making his move," James said grimly. "He's using this as an opportunity to take control of the station. We're on our own, Rhea." He scanned the bay, his eyes darting from one sealed exit to another. "There." He pointed to a barely visible seam in the far wall. "Emergency access hatch. Leads to the lower levels. Rarely used, probably forgotten." He wrestled the hatch open, revealing a dark, narrow passage. The air that wafted out was stale and thick with the scent of decay. "Not exactly inviting, but it's our only option." He squeezed through the opening, pulling Rhea after him. The lower levels were a labyrinth of dimly lit corridors and forgotten storage rooms. Pipes dripped condensation, and the air hummed with the low thrum of dormant machinery. As they rounded a corner, 3 hulking maintenance robots lumbered into view. Their optical sensors glowed red, and their metallic limbs whirred menacingly. "Reprogrammed," James said, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. "Thorne's pets." "Wait," Rhea said, her voice strained. She reached out a trembling hand towards the robots. Her eyes glazed over and she swayed slightly. I can feel them. They are confused, afraid." She spoke in a series of clicks and whistles, alien sounds that resonated deep within the robots' metallic bodies. The robots hesitated, their red eyes flickering. Slowly, their movements became less jerky, less aggressive. Finally, they powered down, collapsing in inert heaps on the floor. Rhea gasped, stumbling against James. It takes much," she whispered, her face pale and slick with sweat. "Their minds are not easy to reach." "You did good, Rhea," James said, supporting her. "Rest. We need to keep moving." They pressed on, deeper into the bowels of the station. They came to a large, sealed door marked with a biohazard symbol. James bypassed the lock and the door hissed open, revealing a hidden research lab. The scene inside was chilling. Rows of stasis pods lined the walls, each containing a human subject. Wires and tubes snaked from their bodies, feeding into complex machinery. Data screens displayed disturbing readouts, and the air reeked of antiseptic and fear. What is this?" Rhea whispered, her voice filled with horror. "Prilorian experimentation," James said grimly. "They've been using humans as lab rats, finding ways to make themselves stronger, smarter, more ruthless." A voice croaked from the shadows. "Help me." A figure emerged from behind a bank of equipment. It was a Prilorian, but unlike the sleek, armored drones they had encountered, this one was gaunt and disheveled. His chitinous armor was cracked and stained, and his antennae drooped. Was a scientist," the Prilorian said, his voice weak. "I defected. I can help you. Escape. In exchange, safe passage off this horrible place." James narrowed his eyes, assessing the Prilorian. "Why should we trust you?" "Because," the scientist rasped, "Lyra, she is under direct orders from the Queen herself to eliminate the defective offspring, regardless of the cost, to the station, to the humans, all expendable." A wave of static crackled through the lab's comm system. A voice, smooth and chillingly calm, filled the room. "This is Director Thorne. To James Wright and the Prilorian abomination. Surrender the defective offspring and I guarantee safe passage off the station for both of you. Consider this a final act of self-preservation." Before James could respond, the lab door hissed open and Thrain, scientists, armed with stun batons, rushed in. They were quickly disarmed and subdued, their faces a mixture of fear and desperation. James grabbed a discarded datapad and began rerouting the station's internal sensors. "Thorne's cloaked drones are still out there. Let's see if we can give ourselves a little warning." The datapad beeped, displaying a schematic of the lower levels. "I've rerouted the sensors to detect their energy signatures. It'll give us a little heads up." Rhea shivered. I sense something else," she said, her voice barely a whisper. A powerful energy coming from a restricted area deeper down." The datapad confirmed it. A large, uncharted zone on the lower levels. "Could be our escape route," James said, "or a whole new level of trouble." As if on cue, the lights flickered and the lab door slammed shut. The unmistakable hum of Prilorian drones filled the air. "They've found us," James said grimly. "Time for that trouble." They burst out of the lab and into a vast, abandoned cargo bay. 3 cloaked drones materialized, their weapons charged and ready. The final showdown had begun. "Wait." The Prilorian scientist fumbled with a device hidden beneath his damaged armor. "A sonic disruptor, it can disable the drones, but it requires precise frequency, too high and it will collapse this entire section." Rhea closed her eyes, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The frequency, it is oscillating, changing. I can feel it. The resonance, almost." She adjusted the dial on the disruptor, her hand trembling. "Now." The 3 of them stepped through the shimmering energy field, the air thick with a metallic tang that stung James' nostrils. Before them unfolded a chamber of impossible scale, dwarfing even the largest engineering bays he'd witnessed. At its heart pulsed a sphere of raw energy, contained within a lattice of shimmering force fields. The core throbbed with an unnatural rhythm, casting eerie shadows that danced across the cavernous space. "By the Queen," the Prilorian scientist breathed, his multifaceted eyes wide with a mixture of awe and horror. "It's even worse than I imagined. This is a world ender. A Prilorian bioweapon designed to eradicate entire planets." A tremor ran through the floor and Rhea recoiled, clutching her head. It's not stable," she gasped, her voice strained. "It's sending out a signal, a distress call. I can almost hear it." Suddenly, a nearby monitor flickered to life. "Rizal Doctor," into the smug face of Dr. Thorne. "Ah, James, how good of you to join the party. I was beginning to think you'd lost your nerve." He chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Pity you had to bring company. Still, no matter. You're just in time to witness the dawn of a new era, an era where the Prylorian homeworld is reduced to ash and humanity takes the blame." From the shadows, figures emerged, clad in lab coats but armed with weaponry that pulsed with the same raw energy as the core. Thorne's followers, ready to unleash hell. "The core is shielded," the Prylorian scientist said urgently, "by a complex energy field. Only a Prylorian queen can deactivate it, and even then only for a short time." James' mind raced. A Prylorian queen. Then it hit him. "Rhea," he said, turning to her, "your genetic connection. Could you disrupt the field just long enough for us to sabotage the core?" Rhea's antennae drooped. Fear flickered in her eyes. "Connect to that. It would amplify her. I don't know if I can." "You can," James insisted, placing a hand gently on her carapace. "You're stronger than you think, Rhea. And we can't let Thorne do this. Whole planets are at stake." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Closing her eyes, she reached out with her mind, a faint blue glow emanating from her. "Impressive," Thorne sneered, watching Rhea's efforts. "But predictable. I anticipated this." He tapped a control panel and the energy core pulsed violently. The lights flickered and a high-pitched whine filled the chamber. "A little countermeasure I cooked up. Amplifies the core's output. Should fry her little brain nicely." The chamber began to shake violently. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls and chunks of debris rained down from the ceiling. Alarms blared, a cacophony of warning klaxons. The Prylorian scientist, with a desperate cry, lunged at the control panel, tearing wires and smashing circuits with his bare hands. "Go, Rhea, now!" he shouted, before an energy surge engulfed him, leaving only a smoking husk. Rhea, spurred by his sacrifice, focused her will. The blue glow intensified, and for a fleeting moment the energy field flickered and wavered. A wave of nausea washed over James as he glimpsed the unfiltered energy of the core. But Rhea, her eyes snapped open wide with a horrifying understanding. She doesn't just want me back," she whispered, her voice trembling. "She wants to use this, to conquer the galaxy." James' blood ran cold. It wasn't just about Rhea. The Queen had far grander, far more terrifying ambitions. Suddenly, the chamber doors burst open and Lyra strode in, flanked by her drones. A firefight erupted, laser fire ricocheting off the walls as Lyra's forces engaged Thorne's followers. But Rhea, still connected to the core, was radiating an intense empathic field. The drones, caught in its wave, began to malfunction. Their movements became erratic, their targeting systems haywire. Then one by one they turned on Lyra, their weapons trained on their former mistress. "What?" Lyra shrieked, her face contorted with rage. "You defective scrap heaps, how dare you betray me?" She glared at James and Rhea, her eyes burning with hatred. "You think you've won? You're both pathetic. Humans and defective Prylorians. You're nothing." Thorne, seeing his opportunity, seized Rhea, dragging her towards the energy core. "The Queen wants you. Fine, she can have you. As a conduit, I'll use you to control this weapon and the galaxy will tremble before me." As Thorne began to connect Rhea to the core, a deafening roar filled the chamber. The station's communication system crackled to life, broadcasting a message that cut through the chaos like a knife. A voice, cold and imperious, echoed throughout the station, the voice of the Prylorian Queen herself. "Rhea," she commanded, her voice tinged with an unearthly power. "Surrender yourself, immediately." The Prylorian Queen's voice, amplified and distorted, boomed across the station's comms, overriding all other channels. "Humans, you harbor a traitor, a genetic aberration. Surrender it and your world will be spared. Refuse and feel the might of Prylos unleashed. This bio-WDRN will bring you to your knees." Dr. Thorne, eyes gleaming with manic energy, ignored the Queen's ultimatum. He reached for the final connection point on the bioweapon core, a thick cable that pulsed with raw power. "Almost there," he muttered, his voice barely audible above the Queen's threats. "Soon, Rhea, you will be the instrument of our salvation. Galactic conquest is within our grasp." He moved to fully connect Rhea to the core, intent on overriding her will and weaponizing her empathic abilities. "No," James roared, launching himself at Thorn. He tackled the doctor, sending him sprawling away from the core. Sparks flew as Thorn's hand brushed against exposed wires. "Get away from her," James yelled, his fists clenched. Thorn, enraged, scrambled to his feet. "You fool. You don't understand the power we wield here." He lunged at James, a syringe filled with a glowing fluid appearing in his hand. James dodged the attack, grabbing Thorn's arm and slamming it against the console. The syringe shattered, the fluid splattering across the floor, hissing as it ate through the metal. He disarmed Thorn, throwing him against the wall. Rhea, still connected to the core by several smaller conduits, cried out in pain. "James, the Queen, I see." A torrent of images flooded her mind. Worlds consumed by fire, populations enslaved, the chilling rationale behind the Queen's relentless ambition. The Queen believed only through absolute, merciless control could order be imposed on the chaotic galaxy. Fear, not strength, fueled her conquests. James, ignoring Thorn, wrestled with the conduits binding Rhea. He ripped one free, then another, the station's emergency lights flashing in time with Rhea's ragged breaths. Finally, with a desperate heave, he severed the last connection. Thorn, dazed but recovering, watched with fury. "You haven't won. She's still linked. The core still resonates with her." He was right. Rhea remained connected, a faint energy field crackling around her. I can feel it," she gasped, her violet eyes wide with fear. "The power, it's overwhelming." But then a flicker of understanding crossed her face. "But there's a weakness, a flaw in the design, the energy. It loops back on itself." She could feel the flow of power, the intricate pathways of the bioweapons core. "Tell me," James urged, his voice tight with urgency. Rhea, drawing on the Queen's memories and her own empathic understanding, explained, her voice weak but clear. "The primary modulator. It creates a feedback loop if we can. Amplify it. Reverse the polarity." James didn't hesitate. He dove to the console, his fingers flying across the controls. "I see it, the modulator frequency. If I reroute the energy flow." He worked feverishly, rerouting circuits, bypassing safeguards, his brow slick with sweat. Almost there. Within moments he had reconfigured the core. "Now," he yelled. "Rhea, focus. Amplify the feedback." Rhea closed her eyes, reaching out with her mind. She channeled the energy from the station's power grid, focusing it on the modified core. A low hum filled the room, growing in intensity until it became a deafening roar. Then, with a flash of light, the core pulsed, emitting a wave of energy that washed over the station. The destructive capacity of the bioweapon was neutralized. But the Queen wasn't finished. Sensing the loss of her weapon, she focused her full mental power on Rhea, attempting to seize control. Rhea screamed, clutching her head, her body convulsing. "She's trying to. Take me, control me." James, helpless against the psychic assault, felt a surge of desperation. He couldn't lose her now. He couldn't let the Queen win. He reached out, not with technology, but with his heart. He transmitted his feelings, his belief in Rhea, his admiration for her strength, his hope for a future where humans and Prilorians could coexist. He flooded her mind with his unwavering support. Rhea, battered but not broken, felt James' presence, a warm, comforting light in the darkness. His belief in her was a shield against the Queen's onslaught. With a final, defiant surge of will, she broke free from the Queen's influence. "No," Rhea cried out, her voice echoing with newfound power. "I will not be your weapon." She redirected the psychic energy, focusing it not on destruction but on understanding. The energy, amplified by James' hope and Rhea's empathy, surged outwards, traveling across the vast gulf of space to the Prilorian homeworld. It washed over the collective consciousness of the Prilorians, opening their minds to new possibilities, new perspectives, new emotions. On the bridge of the flagship, Lyra staggered, clutching her head. Images flooded her mind. The faces of the enslaved, the destruction wrought by the Queen's ambition, the quiet strength of Rhea and James. Doubt gnawed at her loyalty. Confusion clouded her tenacity. Lyra, torn between duty and newfound understanding, made her choice. "This is Lyra," she announced over the open channel, her voice trembling but firm. "I am defecting. The Queen's methods are unacceptable. I offer my support to the human and the Prilorian offspring." James, Rhea, and Lyra, standing together in the now silent station, prepared to broadcast a message to the galaxy. "This is James Wright," James began, his voice filled with conviction. "We have witnessed the Queen's deception, her lust for power, her willingness to sacrifice anyone for her own twisted vision. But we have also seen the potential for a new alliance, a new understanding between humans and Prilorians. We offer you hope. We offer you a choice. Choose freedom. Choose empathy. Choose a future where all species can coexist in peace." Rhea stepped forward, her violet eyes shining with tenacity. "The Queen rules through fear, but fear is not strength. Strength comes from understanding, from compassion, from unity. We can build a better galaxy together." Lyra added, "The Queen has lied to us all. There is more to the galaxy than war and conquest. There is hope for a new future." The message went out, echoing across the galaxy, a beacon of hope in the darkness, a testament to the power of human empathy and the courage of a rejected Prilorian offspring.